Now, here in Nigeria, the federal government says it plans to secure multi-billion-dollar loans from Chinese, Portuguese and Turkish financial institutions to complete the ongoing rail projects across the country. Minister of Transportation Muazu Jaji Sambo said this in Abuja when he appeared before the Joint National Assembly Committee on Land and Marine Transport on Thursday, November 3rd. The minister disclosed that the railway network was being expanded through yearly budgetary appropriations since the federal government was facing challenges in securing counterpart funding through loans. Now, let's deepen the discussion now with the RISE analyst Kayode Otitoju. Good afternoon and welcome today. Great to have you. Now, Mr. Otitoju, in terms of railway financing, we've currently seen up to $3 billion being borrowed from China to date. Now, this refinancing or addition to funding, if we may call it that, is it a red flag in any way? Is it an indicator that something is not being well managed?
Not quite.
Okay.
Because the money is to be used for some work in progress. So there are some routes that are ongoing. There are some routes that have been completed but still needed some ancillary services, like the train station, some of the train stations and points of pickup along Lagos, Ibadan. Though the rail itself is already operational and passengers are using it. But there are some, stations, designated stations, that are not yet as equipped as what you will get in an international airport, So then again, the Kaduna Kano route or the Abuja Kaduna, anyway, that one is very popular because of the incident that happened. Even when it resumes, there are some things that have to be done, like the signaling, like electronics, security, and all sorts of things that have to be done. Then Itape, Ajaokuta, rail, it's operational too, but there are still some things that have to be done. So rail transportation is very, very important to national economic life because it moves passenger in large quantity. It moves freight in large quantity. It moves on designated route, that is the rail line. So it's very fuel efficient in terms of movement. There is little or no friction between the way and the rolling stock. That is, the rail line is the way. It's already constructed, smooth, and the rail that is moving on top of it, the carrying unit, is so moving in a smooth way that there is no drag. And without drag, then there is fuel efficiency in terms of movement. You will see some vehicles are constructed in such a way that they will be aerodynamic, just to make sure that no drag when they are moving. They pass through the wind. Okay, so rail is very, and again, it's environmental friendly. It's little or no pollution. Gone are those days when you are hearing katapiti, when we are using coal, when you are using coal as the, powering, energy. So, any money spent on rail is a justifiable rail if it is remunerative route. Like Kano Maradi, it's not a remunerative route, okay? And I don't think any government will have taken loan, though the interest of such loan, like the one from Central Bank, from World Bank, is so minimal. But when you take loan, there must be paybacks period. Like Nigerian loan burden, as of today, is something that will take us 3 decades to pay. under normal payback period that, we are doing our what is expected of us religiously. It will take 3 decades. That's about 30 years. And now we are taking more. And what I can understand is that China is one of our traditional creditors. We have China, France, Germany, there are about 5 of them. About 5 of them. So why Portugal and why Turkey? Does it mean that our traditional creditors are pissed off and it's only China that is still ready to, I don't know why we are extending the frontier of loan giving nations for this completion and execution of every project. More so that by ways and means that is being used to finance subsidy in Nigeria, which run to trillions of naira. That ways of means money that you got from, say, central bank or from loan, in order to finish and finance ongoing budget that you are unable to complete, and which, according to former Governor Kayode, the chairman of appropriation on land and marine transport, is put at three months to 2023. In fact, it's even lamenting that will distort the 9th Senate distinct that want to achieve having budget 3 of January to December. So, okay.
When you mentioned why this is being extended to Portugal and Turkey, I was thinking maybe it's because we understand the federal government has had challenges, securing counterpart funding through loans. But, this is coming on the heels of, this period whereby the government, in which the government has been criticized for, there's already been an outcry basically for this borrowing spree, and now we're talking about more and more borrowing. Of course, you've painted the picture of it being remunerative, but is it really worth the cost in terms of how much more debt we're going to accrue, and the fact that this is going to be inherited by a new administration for something that is not even a guarantee that will be completed?
You see, infrastructure for transportation is really very costly. For rail, in fact, the fixed cost of getting the way and I want to go as very as very simple as possible, not using technical terms. The carrying unit is very expensive, but because of economy of scale of either number of passengers, because a rail line at one trip can take as many passengers as 50 buses on the road, not together with buses with their externalities and pollutions. Rail will take over 50 buses passenger. Ekeledili Chuku type of buses, not the detonate types we are seeing around. Okay, so that's that. It saves money both in terms of energy, that's fuel, in terms of pollution, in terms of what have you, and the number of people that are moved from one point to the other. Because really, transport is nothing if there is no pull and push, reason. There must be reason to move from one place to the other, either for you to satisfy your socio-economic means or to take cargo from one place to the other for human. And it can only be achieved when it's moving. So when government starts any project and it's not yet moving, and people are not moving, every kobo you spent is tied down and it's not productive. So I think it's the right thing for government to get money to complete the project so that people can benefit from the advantages of,
Let's talk about getting the project moving. And the Africa Investment Forum is currently taking place in Ivory Coast, and one of the big conversations there is risk. Funders who invest in infrastructure across the continent and banks, development banks, are having conversations about how risky it is to do business and to invest in infrastructure projects across the continent, not just in Nigeria. Now, when we look at specifically Chinese debt, although China has now become a traditional creditor across the continent again, you look at instances, for example, in Kenya, in Congo, in Zambia, where there has been default on the funding, on the financing, on the repayment of loans. And usually with Chinese credit, there comes the sovereignty clause. And you don't normally find this with other debt. Now, the Chinese sovereignty clause says that, well, if you fail to repay your loans, then China has the right to take over whatever infrastructure project it is. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is the fact that traditionally when Chinese lend money for infrastructure projects, they also contract Chinese companies to come and complete the projects. So in essence, they pay themselves back, but we're now stuck with the debt. So, looking at this, when the last 500 million came in, if you remember, the National Assembly actually raised alarm to the Minister of Transport, Rotimi Amechi, and said, are you sure we should be taking this 500 million from China because of all the examples that we've seen happening across the continent? Now, look at the Abuja-Kaduna Railway. There's risk involved. We can't run away from the fact that anywhere in Africa, and for the purposes of this conversation, in Nigeria, there's risk involved in investing or securing funding for this infrastructure. Do you think it's wise to continue going in this way, or do you think it's maybe time for us to look at new ways to finance our own infrastructural development projects?
You see, what gives concern on loan taking is debt to GDP ratio. The debt to GDP ratio of Ghana is 41%. That of Nigeria is 36%. Okay? So as long as what you are using the loan for is something that we promote infrastructure, that will be capital spending, not consumption, countries will still continue to borrow in order to meet such things that will make life easy, better in terms of welfare, ease of doing business, and what have you. Now that whether China all depends on the condition you agreed to at the signing of the loan. The mere fact that Uganda or whatever is facing a certain problem, doesn't mean that Nigeria will face the same with China. You give, like when you are taking your job, this job, I know you give your employer some conditions, and your employer gives you some conditions. When you agree, then you sign the employment. If you don't agree, you go. So the same thing. And again, Transport Ministry is lucky this time around by having Muazu Zambo as the minister. I know Muazu Zambo when he was the head of NIWA, Nigeria Inland Waterway, Lagos Zone. And that was a day we were discussing. And I found that actually when I was in Ports Authority, he was already there too. But I was there maybe 4 years before him. And I left in 1991 while he was still there. So he's someone that is grounded in transportation, unlike Amechi. Amechi area of specialization or callings is different from transportation. So it's very likely before Sambo can commit Nigeria to any loan on transportation, he will have, computed the vulnerability of Nigeria to paying back and the, cost-benefit analysis. And I'm sure he won't sign agreements that will be subjected to the type of, public criticism that of Amishi, commanded,
Well, Mr. Otitoju, I want to go back to what you said earlier on why we're expanding this what's it called? This seeking loans beyond China. Now looking at Portugal and Turkey.
Portugal.
Yes, but what was pointed out or what's been disclosed is that the federal government has had challenges securing counterpart funding through loans. The fact that they're seeking these loans does not mean that they're guaranteed to get them. So what happens to this project in the event that these gestures by the federal government falls flat and they don't actually get the loans?
See, our domestic loan debt is so much that to Central Bank alone of Nigeria, we are owing 2.5 trillion naira. Okay, that's even within. And the public debt, which means debt loan taken by federal, state, and federal capital territory, all put together is so much. And once infrastructure is important, and your annual budgetary allocation cannot meet it, when you are able to get loan to finance it, then go for it, as long as the terms, are soft. That whether China or going to Turkey or whatever, it means that actually probably the condition given to us is reasonable and is soft. And so the counterpart funding, because when loan is to be given on a project, okay, they will first compute what it will take. Then the country will say, okay, this so percentage I will bring up. Then so it's like both of you are funding. Then on the China always insists that their nationals should participate in the execution of the project. Once it's signed, then it's signed. Okay, there are some technical, part of a project that we may not have the local expertise, maybe in using the machine or whatever. Once they said that should be packaged with the loan, then we have to agree.
All right. Well, we certainly will be perusing and interrogating the terms and conditions of these loans when they come through. Mr. Otitoju, it's always a pleasure to have you with us analyzing some of the big topics, big issues happening across the country.